Today I'm going to go through our upgrades to our mapling process. I'll also go through the process of collecting the sap, turning it into syrup, and some of the final products that we make out of it. As you can see, we've switched from buckets to tubing. I made an RO or reverse osmosis rig to help concentrate the sap. We've made some improvements to the cooker itself, and I will also go through actually doing the cooking, finished cooking in the house, and turning it into various products. This has been a very weird winter for us as far as weather. We get a little bit of snow and then it rains, and then we get some snow and then it rains, and we haven't built up much of anything. So we've added about 30 taps in this tubing system. Last year we had about 20 taps with buckets, but we thought we would increase our collection and make it easier. The setup for the tubing is not actually any easier. In fact, it's a lot more difficult than working with the buckets. However, once you have it in place, it's a lot easier as far as collecting the sap. It just all runs downhill and into a large container. So there's a main line that goes downhill. We put about 300 foot worth in, and then there's laterals that actually go to the trees and to the individual taps, and those run downhill into the main line. Each of the smaller tubes have what they call a saddle that pierces into the 3/4 inch main line. The laterals are 5/16 lines. Each lateral collects from 5 or 6 taps, and then everything drains down this main line into a 275 gallon tank. The main line is supported by this heavy wire that is tensioned fairly hard so that there's no real dips in it. We process about once a week, and it kind of depends on the weather, but we try not to let it go any more than a week, especially if it's warm, because it can actually start to ferment. We go from the 275 gallon tank into 55 gallon drums. This is actually the second drum for this particular tank full, and the tank is empty at this point. So we won't have quite a full, but we'll have about 90 gallons to process. We've tapped trees that are relatively close to the house so that we don't have to go too far, and there were plenty of maples in this one section that lend itself well to this particular project. The girls like to keep an eye on the doings. RO unit cannot be allowed to freeze. So we like to actually do the processing inside if there's any chance of weather being cold enough to freeze it. This little greenhouse thing tends to stay 5 to 10 degrees warmer than the outside temperature. This is a little better shot of the RO unit. It's basically based on home type RO setup. It's not a commercial setup. It's something that I put together from information that I got from the internet. It uses 4 RO filters, a 5 micron household water filter, and a pump that is meant to increase pressure in a line. There is all kinds of information on these online, so I'm not going to go into what you need to make one. A couple of things of note here is this is using this plastic PVC pipe to get the tubing down to the bottom is quite effective rather than using a weight. And the other thing that I do that I have not seen too many people do is to actually put the concentrate back into the barrel while taking the permeate, which is pretty much like a distilled water, although it's filtered. And I put that outside if I'm just going to dump it, or I'll save usually 10 gallons or so of that to clean equipment and whatnot when I'm done. It's quite purified by the time it comes out and through these filters. That is what you would typically use from this type of a filter setup for household use. But I'm more interested in the concentrate, the stuff that does not go through the filter to get all of the bacteria and debris and stuff out of it. So what I'm after is the concentrated sugars. So for every gallon of the permeate or the water, purified water that comes out of that, that's one less gallon that I have to boil off in the cooker. I run this so that I get about a 50-50. I get 50% concentrate and 50% permeate. And this rig will process about 10 gallons an hour, so I'll get 5 gallons of the permeate per hour. Now here's some of the improvements to the cooker. You can see I've bored some holes in the plate going in underneath the pan so that it will keep a little bit more heat right at the bottom. We also built a grate to go above this tweer. What you're looking at now is it cleaned up and all the holes redone. The grate is made from 1/2-inch square stock and 3/8 by 2-inch flat stock. It just makes it a little easier to get a hotter fire. I'll put a link to the original maple cooker build down at the bottom there. We could use just a naturally aspirated fire, but find that using this blower gives us a lot harder boil, so it goes quicker. And it's a fractional horsepower motor. It's about 50 years old, but it still works great. This is a shot of the grate in action. We also added a preheater pan. You can fill this with sap and it warms it before the sap goes into the main cooker. And it has a spigot to allow just a small amount of sap to come in at a time, but very consistently, constantly, so it keeps everything at a boil better. This is actually the cooking pan from our very first maple syrup cooking unit. I'll show a picture of it here shortly. That's it. So that's now doing duty as a pre-warming pan. You can adjust the valve on this so that it allows the raw sap to come in at a flow rate that is consistent with how much you're boiling off, so that you can keep the boiler at a very consistent height. You still have to pay attention whether it's going up or down or whatever, and adjust the valve as you go. I also made this cherry spatula type thing for helping either stir or scrape the pan as we're draining it to, filtering it for the final cook in the house.
Or add after you get to that point.
Here my son is using a Brix meter to test the sugar content of where we're at with the cooker so that we can get it close.
$53. Coming up pretty good.
We also added an extension to our drain pipe to get it a little further away from the pan to make it easier to collect and filter the syrup. At this point, it pretty much is syrup. For syrup, you want the Brix to be about 66. We usually try to stop the process with the wood boiler at around 63, 64 to give us a little bit more control over the very final stages. We do a double filtration at this point, a couple layers of cheesecloth and then a fine mesh screen underneath that. Here is getting the last of the syrup out of that fine mesh screen. We got about 2 gallons, maybe a touch over 2 gallons of syrup from this particular cook, although it's not all going to go into syrup, as you'll see here shortly.
Floor is sticky over here.
Yeah.
He's ladling some out. This has been cooked up to I think 233, and we're going to turn this into
so this is
a
going
maple
for
cream.
Maple cream at 233. Now you got to cool it to between 80 and 100, so around 90, and then beat it for a long time. So that's at 236 already?
Yeah.
So you need the candy at the 236, as he said. So he's ladling some out to now pour into molds. So now the syrup has cooled enough to do the maple cream. So now we're going to start to beat it. My son is cooking the last of the maple syrup down into a maple sugar. And here my wife is taking the maple cream and putting it into jars. Getting close to the end stage for the maple sugar. This will start to even get smaller and smaller, finer particles as it finishes cooking. Oh, the final product from this batch: maple syrup, maple candy, maple sugar, and maple cream.